Hey guys, I'm Shehan from Scala Studios. So today I'm going to show you guys how I created this animation loop in Blender. You can also check out some of my other animation loops in the channel. And I also try to post a daily render on my Instagram, and I post behind the scenes videos on my Instagram story, so make sure you guys follow me on Insta as well. So with that said, let's get on with the video. So I'm going to start off by selecting everything with A and deleting with X. And now with Shift A, I'm going to add a new cube, tab into edit mode, and with G while pressing Control, I'm going to move it up so that it's right on the pivot point like that. Now I'm gonna scale it up in the Z axis with S and Z. So scale it up a little bit more and to make it look like a building. So that looks good for me. And with Shift D, I'm gonna duplicate it and move it to the side and scale it down a bit and try to get a different variation. I'm going to extrude it in with S and E, extrude out again, E to extrude in, E to extrude out, E to in, and E out. And also scaling again with E, that, and extrude it out, make it a little pointy. Now Shift D, I'm going to duplicate this first building again and move it to the side, scale it down, and tab in edit mode, add a loop cut over there, and select this edge, and with Control B I can bevel it and make it look a bit different. And again I'm going to duplicate the middle building and scale it down. This time I'm going to select this edge and push it down so that we have another variation. And again I'm going to duplicate this building, and this one I'm going to make it a little bit more taller than everything else. Duplicate this and make that a little bit taller as well. And duplicate, tab in edit mode, add few loop cuts in the middle and take to the front, Control B bevel, and with the mouse wheel add a few edges and you have a curved edge. And yep, that looks good. I'm not gonna add shade smooth, and since all these buildings are going to be in the background. Alright, that looks good. And you can also make any kinds of variations. You can take examples from the real world and model your buildings. So what I'm going to do is repeat the process, just scale and get some buildings of different scales. And with Shift D, I can scale this to get a taller building as well. And you can also rotate these buildings like RX 180 to turn it the other side. And now I might also make some smaller buildings like really short ones, and scale them down and make all sorts of variations out of these buildings as well, so that I can use them in sort of like the front of our scene. Just duplicate, tab in edit mode, and add all sorts of details with beveling and extruding out geometry. And you can also duplicate and rotate these to make them look kind of different as well. So something like that looks kind of cool for me for now. Alright, extrude, duplicate, bevel. Alright, now I'm done with the building, so now I'm gonna add a plane. But before that I'm gonna move these to the side. With Shift A, I'm gonna add a plane, scale it up with S and 10 in the numpad to scale it 10 times. And now I'm gonna tab in edit mode and add a few loop cuts. Actually, I'm gonna subdivide it. So tab into edit mode and right click, subdivide, and in the black box here I'm gonna type 40, and we have 40 vertices in our plane now. And now in the properties panel over here, I'm gonna add a new particle system and make it a hair particle system. Also, I'm gonna select all these buildings and add them to a new collection with M, a new collection, and I'm gonna call it buildings and hit OK, so that they move to a new collection. And now here in the particle properties, you can select nope, not source, render as object, no, render as collections. And now you can select your buildings collection, and you guys can see all the buildings look kind of weird because they are kind of flat on the floor. So we're gonna fix that in a second. So click advanced, and in rotation select none, and that should usually fix that issue over there. And you can play with those orientation axes, and you should get what you want. And now I feel like these taller buildings, there's too much taller buildings, so what I'm gonna do is duplicate these smaller ones a bit, and maybe you can rotate them a few times to make sure there's buildings don't look like they're repeating. So what I'm gonna do is duplicate them a few times and get some more small buildings down there. So for my final animation, I of course modeled and made some variations, but for now I'm not going to make a lot of variations. I'm just gonna duplicate them. I'm gonna decrease the number of emissions to about 750. Yeah, that looks good. Also, I feel like adding a path somewhere here in the middle. So what I'm gonna do is go here and create a new vertex group, and I'm gonna select these vertices and select these vertices, and I'm gonna click assign and go back to our particle settings, and at the bottom here I'm gonna select vertex groups, and in density I'm gonna select the group. And now you guys can see we have sort of like a road path in the middle. Also, you guys can see these buildings are overlapping. You guys can also actually fix that by decreasing the number of emissions to about whatever that fits, something like 500. But since this is a pretty low poly scene, I don't really care too much about these overlapping buildings. So especially the small ones, you can't really see them much, so you can just ignore them for now. But if you're getting high detail close-ups, you might actually have to like pay some attention to that, but I'm just gonna leave it like that for now. Now I'm gonna duplicate this bottom plane, Shift D, duplicate, and I'm gonna delete the particle system from that top plane, and I'm gonna add a wireframe modifier. And alright, so it looks kind of weird as for now, so I'm gonna decrease the thickness to about 0.008, and yeah, that looks good. Maybe 6. Yeah, that's cool. Now I'm gonna drag select all of this and move that to a new collection, and I call it block with M to create a new collection, and block. Alright, and I'm going to make a new instance of that. Shift A, collection instance, and create a new instance of that. Now I'm going to move it with G and Y while pressing Control so that it snaps to the grid like that. And now I'm going to duplicate that same block, Shift D, same instance, Shift D, and move it while pressing Control. Select those two while pressing Control G Y and move it to the front as well. And again, I'm going to select these 4, Shift D and G Y. So I duplicated the instance about 8 times or 7, and that looks good for me. And now I'm gonna add my camera, and I'm gonna place it, I'm gonna make it 0. I'm gonna move it to the front like that, and I'm gonna make it 0, make all the axes 0. I'm gonna press N and get my items, and X rotation 0, everything 0, and I'm gonna rotate it. Now I'm gonna make it 90 in the x-axis, and then minus 90 in the z-axis. And with 0 in the numpad, we can go to the camera view, and this looks good so far, but we can make some improvements. So I'm gonna push it back, GX, and scale it, bring it up. Also, we can play with the focal length and make get a wider look. So something like, that's too much, so maybe bring it to the front. Okay, that's too much, so maybe something like 30 millimeters, 20. Just play with it until you find something that fits you. And I'm gonna move my camera somewhere there. That looks good. And maybe we can get some top view as well, so that we can see the horizon. So I'm gonna rotate the camera like that. That's too much. Something like that. Okay, that looks good. And move it somewhere to the middle. In the y-axis like that, and 10 meters. Okay, that looks good. And rotate it something like that. And whatever that fits you is good. So now I'm gonna add a circle, Shift A, circle, and I'm gonna move it somewhere over there. And RY90, scale it up, and tab in edit mode, and press F to fill the face, and I'm gonna move it back like that and scale it up. I'm gonna come out of the camera view and scale it down a bit. At this point, of course, you can use your own creative freedom to get something you like. And with Control 2, I'm gonna add the subdivision surface modifier as well to get the smooth edges rolling. So I feel like now is a good time to add our materials. Let's go to our buildings over here, and I'm going to select one of these and add a new material. And also I'm going to the shading tab, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it black. So I'm gonna have to link all the buildings together. So I select all the buildings and select this building at last, and with Control L, get the links menu and select materials. And you guys can see all the buildings have the same material now. And now I'm going to drag this principal node somewhere here, and with Shift A, I'm going to add an emission node. Place it somewhere over here, and also add a Voronoi texture. Place it over there, and also I'm gonna make it chippy chip. Plug the distance to the color. No, I'm gonna add the two shaders with the mix shader, but before that, make sure you have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled. So with Shift Control, you can get a preview of your texture. So with Control T, you can get all the mapping nodes and the texture coordinate nodes. And I'm going to select all these buildings, and with Shift A, apply scale. And for now, I have plugged the texture coordinate node to the object, and apply scale, and play with the random value over here to about 0.3, and scale, of course, something like that looks good. And also I'm going to add my mix shader now, plug the emission and the principal shader, and plug the distance to the factor, and with Control Shift you can get a view of that. And maybe you can switch these to and add a color ramp, Shift A, color ramp, and now I'm gonna make it constant and black, white. Maybe switch these two like that. Now I'm going to make this something like that. Looks good. Okay, so the problem here is because we have plugged the object to the UV. So what I'm gonna do is select everything, and I'm gonna cube project everything and plug the UV to the mapping vector. And you guys can see this building looks a bit weird, so I'm gonna try and to unwrap it once again, and still it doesn't work. So what I'm gonna do is go to the UV editing space and select its UVs and scale them up like that, so that it looks similar to all the other buildings. So yeah, that looks kind of cool. Now we can go back to shading, and all the buildings look kind of close, and we can decrease the size, and that looks kind of good for me. Maybe decrease or increase the scale to until you get something you like. And also for the top roofs, we are gonna have a different material. So I'm gonna go to the materials tab and create a new material, and I'm gonna assign, no wait, before that I'm gonna select all the buildings as well. Select all the buildings and select this building last, and Control L and material, so that this material is in all the other buildings as well. So now again I'm gonna select all the buildings and edit mode, tap into edit mode, go to no, not faces, should be select, select the top face of this building and go to select and select similar, select normals, and now you guys can see all the roofs are selected, so we can assign it like that. And I'm going to assign these roofs as well, the side ones, because the normals are different in those. And that looks good. And obviously we're going to change the color from white to something else, maybe something like dark gray. Yeah, that looks good. And now we can move back to our scene, and now I'm going to select this wireframe grid and add an emission shader to that. So here I'm going to select an emission shader, and I'm going to change the color to something like blue. That looks kind of cool for me. And also I'm going to make the background plane, the bottom plane, black, and I'm going to make the sun an emission shader as well. Emission shader. I'm gonna make it something like that is green, so this is yellow, orange. I have a color problem, so, and yeah, that looks kind of cool for now. And now to get, that looks good. To show some depth, we are going to add some volume. So we're gonna start by adding a cube with Shift A, cube, and scale it in the Y axis. Scale it up a bit and then scale it in the Y axis like that. S and S, Y, S, Y, or you can just drag it like that in edit mode until you feel like it's enough. So something like this looks good. Select the face and drag it. And now I'm going to tap out of edit mode and go to the object section, and I'm going to make the viewport display, make it a wire, And now new material, delete the principal shader with X and shift A. I'm gonna add a principal volume shader. I'm gonna plug the volume into the volume, and you guys can see it's there. Volume. It looks too dark, so we're going to put the density down to about 0.0, just make it 0, and I'm going to increase the emission strength to about 0.1, and I'm going to change the emission color to something like yellowish orange. Yeah, that looks good. And now video, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and make sure you subscribe to the channel for more tutorials, more animation loops, and also let me know in the comments below what kind of tutorials you want me to do next, and see you in the next one. Bye.